can just kind of drift along with not a lot of design or creativity or innovation.
Today's guest is Ron Kauffman. Ron Kauffman is the world's leading educator and motivator for uplifting customer service and building service cultures. Rated as one of the top 25 hottest speakers in the world, Ron presents powerful insights and global best practices gained from working with clients on every continent for 30 years. Interestingly, Ron is living in Singapore, which I'll touch on a little bit later in the introduction, but he has been a pinnacle part of turning the culture and the workforce in Singapore around and working with the government to really help bolster the economy, the government, and to just make Singapore one of the most surging, and I wouldn't say resurging, Ron, but I don't know, maybe you could touch on that later, but into a country that is really coming up in the world, and it's quite fabulous. But to continue, Ron's energetic online and on-stage speeches and workshops have inspired millions and millions of people. Ron is the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Uplifting Service, The Proven Path to Delighting Your Customers, Colleagues, and Everyone Else You Meet, and 14 other books on service, business, and inspiration. Ron's experience and commitment to results have been distilled into proven models and methods for continuous service improvement. His unique approaches to learning and leadership have been featured in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And this is really, really awesome, Ron. In 2018, 19, and 2020, Global Gurus, which is a website and an online magazine that just rates all different types of people in all different aspects, for those of you that don't know, such as leadership, such as service, as we're going to talk about here, but they actually rated Ron as the #1 customer service expert or guru in the world, which is amazing. They also rated Ron as the #1, and his company, the #1 customer service development program in the entire world, which is absolutely crazy and great to hear that we have someone of that caliber on here, Ron. So I thank you so much. But as I mentioned earlier, thank you, Ron. And as I mentioned earlier, Ron moved to Asia in 1990, but he's from America, but he's fallen in love with Singapore so much that he stayed in Singapore since 1990. And has really helped turn that country around, and as I mentioned, into a country that is growing exponentially now. To bring things back to his younger years, he graduated from Brown University, and he also studied with his study in French. So although he studied French, found his way into customer service, which I found fascinating. He is also a founding member of Asia Professional Speakers Singapore, and is the ultimate Frisbee Hall of Fame. He's in the Frisbee Hall of Fame at Brown University, which is crazy. And Ron, didn't you guys start the Frisbee team at Brown, you told me?
Yeah. My high school was the second high school in the world to know the rules of ultimate Frisbee. And when our graduating high school class went to college, we all started our college teams and then took off around the world. So in the 50th anniversary of the sport, I and many others who they call the Johnny Appleseeds were inducted into the Ultimate Frisbee Hall of Fame.
So you really were one of the not only are you a pioneer in service, but also Frisbee. So that's quite interesting. But without further ado, Ron now resides in Singapore, as I mentioned, with his wife, Jen, and together they are really on a mission to serve communities and clients throughout the world. And Ron, I thank you so much for just taking the time out to really be here and to do this and to really help all of the young people in specific that really get a benefit out of this.
Great. Well, Devin, you're one of those young people who's switched on and eager and wanting to do more than just get what's good for you, but share it with others. So it's a privilege and a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Well, thanks, Ron. So and it's funny because as people are watching this, and as I just asked you, 8 a.m. in America, but 8 p.m. in Singapore, which is funny. I actually did one, Ron, with a woman who was in Australia. So I woke up at 5:30 and it was like 5:30 a.m. and I was tired, and she was like, "Oh, it's 9 p.m. by me." But anyways, I'd really like to start off by just giving people a little insight as to how you grew up, where you grew up, basically just sharing your story with us and how you got to where you are now.
Yep. I've had incredibly good fortune looking back over my life and some things that happened that shaped me. And the first was that I grew up in Connecticut, family of 5 children. I'm number 2. And my dad didn't have any siblings. So his parents just had one kid, and his mother taught kindergarten in New York City for 40 years. So from that one son, she got 5 grandkids. So we were like a private kindergarten. And she just taught us about play and about everybody getting along and loving each other. And, you know, a kindergarten teacher as a grandmother set me up really young to realize that it's better if everybody gets along rather than, you know, fighting for a winner. Let's just play with each other. And then that sort of naturally led into Frisbee when I was in high school, because if we meet in person, you'll see I'm much too small to play on any of the major sports teams. But in the Frisbee field, being small can be an advantage because you can move, you can throw low, you can move fast, people. And I started, as you know, the Brown University team. So then the spirit of the game is rule number 1 in Ultimate Frisbee. And the spirit of the game says no referees. The players are responsible for the quality of play. So there was that, hey, it's not kindergarten anymore. It's out on the sports field, but we got to get along. And after that, I got myself involved in citizen diplomacy. So back in the era when there was perestroika and glasnost and the Soviet Union was coming down and China was just opening up, I was involved in organizing tours for a whole group of crazy Americans who were going off to these 2 communist locations in the world on peace missions. So we'd bring Frisbees and skateboards and kites and juggling, and we'd learn their games and they'd learn our games, and that became a way of doing citizen diplomacy. And then finally in 1990, the world sort of grabbed me and said, let's put you to work. And that was Singapore that invited me here for 1 week to help design a national service quality training program, because all the low-cost manufacturing went to China and all the back office operations went to India, and the country literally had to rebuild its economy. And so they realized they had to come up the value chain. That's what service is all about. And they were looking for curriculum. They were looking for a designer. Well, I didn't know much about service, but I knew a lot about adult educational design from the Frisbee festivals that I had done, from the international activities I'd organized in different cultures. And so after 1 week, they said, we've been looking for a guy like you. And I ended up being here for a month and then 7 months. And now it's been 30 years.
So Ron, what did it, because I'm intrigued by this, the fact that you went off to Singapore and you know, went into a country that, have you ever been there before you went there?
I had actually. I was
Okay.
already pretty bitten by the travel bug from my Frisbee days. And so I had been through Singapore, but it was just like, you know, a transit passing through, staying in the city 2 nights. When I came back, I realized that the multicultural, multiracial, harmonious, sort of more community Asian style that fit my vibe really well. And it was an era where the country wanted passionately to learn. And so an educator like me could come in and teach, and it was, you know, a really, really solid match.
So when you first went in, what were you doing? Like, what was your daily activities like? You know, were you working with government? Were you working with, you know,
Both.
corporations, or what was that like?
All the above, with the educational system, with the government agencies, with multinationals, with regional and local companies. And, you know, what I was listening for was what was the design that was needed here, not what were necessarily the principles that needed to be taught. That I understood. That was learning about what is customer service, what is customer experience, how do you earn customer loyalty, what is internal service, how do you build a service culture. Those are the fundamental principles. But every single circumstance or situation in which I was asked to come in and help, it's going to be different politics. It's going to be a different competitive set. There'll be a different legacy or history there, and a different aspiration and readiness for the future. And so that gave me an opportunity to really take the design skills that I learned by doing Frisbee festivals and international tours and bring it into a commercial environment where the outcome was to get people to take better care of other people, to create more value through their actions with other people on the team for other people who would be the customers or the clients. And over the last 3 decades, as that whole field of customer experience, customer service matured, I had the pleasure of being one of the key participants in it that helped to develop the field.
I think that an interesting part is that so many people play sports as a young person, but you were able to, you really utilize that to jumpstart your career, which is extremely insightful. And I wish all of us had the ability to do something along the lines of that.
Yeah.
But it really taught you a lot, it sounds like. And it's crazy. Frisbee really started this for you. And, you know, your sense of teamwork, appreciation, everything that we're going to dive into really stems back to Frisbee. So to kind of
Well,
go,
and in particular, let me just say, Devin, it was the Frisbee festivals, because
okay,
not the tournaments. Tournaments, people want to win and who's better and who throws farther and gets the big prize. But in a festival, you got to get the parks department and the police department and the radio station and the drinks sponsor and the newspaper and the radio to get everybody, to get the public to come into the park, so that the experts can show off and so that the people with the dogs can do the entertainment. But then we'd get everybody to learn. And so the experts would go teach, and the fathers and the daughters and the sons and the mothers would all learn to play with each other. And then the teenagers would be taught the rules to new Frisbee games. And then we'd all come back and watch the pros again and be entertained like Harlem Globetrotters with a flying disc. And then back and forth, and that pulsing back and forth. Well, somebody has to design the sequence of that. Somebody has to be listening for what needs to be adjusted. Somebody has to be on the microphone actually explaining it to everybody. And I had the privilege of doing all those things.
yeah, I didn't. So do they still have these festivals now, Ron? Because I personally, prior to this, I never really heard of Frisbee.
Good question. There have not been. We did a whole national series sponsored by Whammo, the Frisbee owners at the time, but I don't think there are as many Frisbee festivals as there were back then. That was a special era when people were, a little more loose and liberal and open and free with their social associations.
Right. Well, regardless, I think that's so cool personally, because I never really played Frisbee, but I know a lot of friends that do, and they would love something like that.
Devin, I could teach you a throw or two.
I think that would be useful. But Ron, going back to the customer service aspect of it. Actually prior to to touching on that, how have you seen the country of Singapore change since the 1990s? And not only, in the government, but also in the business world, the economy. What are the main changes that you've really seen? Because I'm curious about that.
Well, clearly the country has become incredibly more efficient. It's become far more technologically advanced. The labor force continues to upgrade and upskill constantly with government support. And it's a necessity, because anything that could be done at lower cost somewhere else in the world will be done somewhere else in the world. So it's either got to be even less expensive to do it in Singapore, or Singapore simply has to do it better. And so that kind of a work ethic is throughout the entire country. The country, when I got here, was already religiously harmonious and has stayed that way for 3 decades. So that's a real conscious, intentional focus and effort by everybody. That's not just government mandated. That's the people themselves celebrating each other's holidays, respecting each other's traditions, taking the time to learn something about each other's background. So that's been really extraordinary. But one thing that hasn't changed is that Singapore is a tiny country. It's only got 5 million people on it right now. There's no agricultural hinterland. There's no oil reserves. It's just one city on a little island that has a good geographic location. But it's surrounded by 2 of the largest Muslim countries in the world. It's in a neighborhood that has 14 Asian neighbors that can get, contentious with each other historically. It's got China right up in the backyard. It's had, global activity at a military level that has been quite unpleasant over the past decades. You know what I'm referring to, both in Korea and in Vietnam, as well as all of what happened in World War II. And so this tiny little country, which only got born in 1965, you can't afford to have anybody that's an enemy. We got to be friends with everybody. And so the way of participating diplomatically in the world, the way of participating as a location, a bit like a Switzerland, where, the rest of the world can come and convene, where we're going to do all that we can to get different countries and different people and different points of view to come to a place of respect and consensus, or if not consensus, at least a sense of shared community with each other, for the well-being of everyone, not just alive today, but future generations.
Right. That's cool to hear it from you on the inside, because I've heard personally in college and so forth that Singapore is really growing, especially their economy is growing at a rapid rate, or I don't know how it is since the pandemic hit, but as far as I've known, it's been growing pretty well. But I want to, what I'm really curious about is, we talked one time prior and you had mentioned a lot about how one can construct their own life, really, and not getting caught in the drift of life. And that was something that really stuck with me. And I'd really like you to touch on that, because I think so many can benefit from what you were saying. It was the first time I heard it, and hearing it again would be awesome. So if you could share a little bit about your thoughts on it.
Yeah, let me just set it up a little bit. I've been a maverick all my life. Obviously, the guy who goes to Brown and starts the frisbee team and then does citizen diplomacy in the Soviet Union. I mean, okay, a little bit odd, and coming to Singapore and creating an entire reputation and a career and businesses and an identity in the space of customer service, which isn't even taught in school unless you happen to go to tourism or hospitality school, right? And yet everybody's going to come out of school and go to work, and that means being in service to somebody. And you're telling me that a fundamental curriculum about service is not going to be made available in our educational institutions? And that made me start thinking, what else is not showing up there? What else has evolved in the educational practices of our world that got there by just this institutional drift? You know, for example, today, who sets the curriculum in universities? The people who are already tenured professors. Who decides who gets to become the next tenured professor? The ones who are already the tenured professors. So how much real innovation can be going on in there? And my concern about that was, what might be missing here? What do I not want to miss? And so I've been a really avid student of philosophers, historians, biologists, cultural specialists, diplomats for decades, and spiritual teachers for decades, because I didn't take it like, okay, my college degree, that was all the education I needed. And one of the things that was made clear to me was that there's a fundamental misinterpretation about what it is to be human. And a good answer to the question, what is being human? Tell me how many classes you took in that when you were going to school, Devin. Tell me how many kids in high school today are going to graduate with a high school degree and can't answer the question, what is it to be human?
Yeah, I would say zero, Ron. As I think I told you last time, right? I mean, my professor, she asked us in senior year of college, how many people know what they want to do? You know, how many people have a job lined up or anything behind that? And everybody said, no. And
And that's just at the level of do and job. I'm
Right.
talking about the level of be.
Mm-hmm.
So let me dive right into your question. That was all set up. One of the fundamental misinterpretations, especially in the Western world, is that there's this true self, authentic self, inner self, my genuine self. I have to spend my life discovering who I am. And when I know who I am, I'll live my essential being. Oh, come on. A human being is a social phenomenon. No human being got here without two people having sex. Nobody grew beyond getting born unless there was a whole community of people feeding them, taking care of them, teaching them, watching out for them, protecting them. And as that occurs, we learn the language of that society. As we grow in that family, we learn the bias and the prejudice and the traditions and the practices of that culture, of that community, of that society. And of course, everybody grows up thinking that theirs is right. And then we get to a certain point, a little bit older, when you realize, hey, other people aren't all like me. And we have to make a really fundamental choice. Do you either double down and say, mine's right, it's the best one, and nobody else is as good as us? Or do you get curious about other people and go, isn't this interesting? We all got thrown into a different drift. We all got born at the same moment in time. That's why we're able to see each other like this, because we're still in our bodies. Those are temporary, by the way. We all got thrown into some language. We all got thrown into some family. We all got thrown into something. And we grow in that thinking that's reality. Well, it's a version of reality. And let's call that the drift. If you don't take a conscious, intentional effort to know where you are and choose to augment or enhance that, or see where you are and choose to change it, your whole life can just kind of drift along with not a lot of design or creativity or innovation. But the beautiful thing about human beings is that we can, by reading history, by talking to people from other cultures, by reflecting, by getting a mentor, realize that, you know what, you could make some moves that would cause you to literally move into a different drift. In your case, Devin, you chose to join the military. Now, I don't know if you grew up in a military family, did you?
No, not at all.
Right, you didn't have those practices or those distinctions, but by lifting yourself and saying, I'm going to go place myself in this community, in this style, in this set of traditions, in these practices, the rest of your life is going to be influenced by that, and you know it. Just like when you said, oh, how fortunate you were, Ron, that Frisbee sports ended up being a kind of a crucible for shaping some of your values and your way of thinking about the world, you're going to be doing the same thing with the military. Well, very few people are even taught to think about life that way. And so we go out looking for, well, which job pays the most? rather than which industry do I really want to participate in? Or, where is that job located rather than which part of the world should I consider locating myself in? So this whole issue of recognizing the drift in life, but that human beings have the power of design, which means for a young person today, you should be thinking carefully about where you're going to locate your biology. What kind of a community are you going to let yourself participate in? What kind of a language set are you going to be around and immersed in every day? What kinds of values and virtues exist among the people that you're going to locate yourself in? You as a young person especially are at a time in your life when you can make a choice about how to locate yourself that will influence many other things for the rest of your life.
So then, Ron, does that answer the question as to how do I start to design that life? So if say I'm in a place, because I think a lot of people blame circumstances for where they are. How do you, in your opinion, does one start to find the circumstances they want or create the circumstances they want so then they can go and live a better or a more fulfilled life? Because like, as you said, people nowadays, there is more unhappy people in the world than ever, but technology is rapidly improving. Everything else is improving except for the fact that people are seemingly becoming more unhappy and less fulfilled. And I think a lot of it goes back to, what job makes the most money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Things that we hear in college a lot of the time. So how do I start to maybe fundamentally shift my identity or my being to live that more fulfilled life?
Yeah, very good. Very good. You used a term there when you said circumstances like they were a thing. I don't like my circumstance like it's a fact. And circumstances are an example of a situation in which we find ourselves, in which we're located by conversations. Conversations like, is there an opportunity here? Like, how did I show up in this place? Like, what's going on that people need or people are trying to avoid or people are trying to become? How could I participate in the conversational set in a way that shows up as useful to someone else? I'm a service expert, so I look at it as how can I be valuable to someone else? And then that's not going to happen by magic. That's going to happen by someone making an offer. That's going to happen, change in life, by recognizing a situation and saying, of whom could I make a certain request? Or where is it that there are requests being made, like in the job market, where I could make a promise and be able to fulfill it? And if I can't yet fulfill it because I'm not yet competent, but I'd like to be able to fulfill it in the future, then what requests can I make for somebody to teach me? So the whole locating of yourself as being a conversational entity, somebody who lives in community with other people where it's all going on in conversations, then you become an actor rather than a bit part that's flowing by. Then you can, instead, how do I do the design part? Well, you look at your conversational set and you say, who am I not yet speaking with? What could I go ask them to talk to me about? Who should I be asking for help? What offer can I make to other people? Where do I see a need? How can I show up in this space as being useful or valuable? Leaning into the conversational world that way as a designer of the conversations you're in is what opens the door to then changing the, quote, circumstances, as you called them.
Right. So then essentially one is creating their own drift, Ron. Is that fair to say?
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question.
I said, the first time we talked, I never heard a lot of this stuff. And I had to have you define conversations, drift.
So the drift is way huger than what you and I can design. Okay, the drift comes out of history of our biology. I mean, how do we get from the Big Bang to a baby? All right. I mean, that went all the way through physics, that went through chemistry, that went through matter, that went through the start of first life forms, that went through reptiles, that went through mammals, that went through evolution. Bingo, here we are. So, I mean, the drift, everything I just said was just the biological, physical part. Now let's look at it culturally. Let's look at it linguistically. Let's look at it socially. Let's look at it militarily. Let's look at it financially. Let's look at it industrially. The drift is this enormous phenomenon going on. Bingo, you get a human life. So you may get 70, 80, 90, 110, 120 years, given how young you are now. What you going to do with that? How are you going to locate yourself in those huge drifts? Well, for example, I moved to another country. That made me a, quote, expatriate, but it also gave me a certain kind of freedom because all the bias and traditions and prejudices that I grew up with, they don't really apply here. Other ones do. I become, therefore, automatically a different observer. Now, I wasn't satisfied with just saying, let me go to another country. I mean, I've done more than 100 flights a year for 35 years. And now with COVID, I'm not flying at all. And Devin, at my age, that's great. I love it. It's a real change of life. But all those years of traveling gave me the ability to observe the drifts that people were in, and it made me a better designer of the drifts I wanted to be in.
Right. I think that's so, yeah, that's so fascinating. The fact that you change the drift. The drift already exists, but you can place yourself into another drift, is what you're saying, if I'm correct.
And in whatever drift you're in, you can design the way you participate with your conversation. So for example, I said to you, when you get into the military where you are now, you're going to have what is it, a platoon or a squad, or what is it called?
A platoon. That's right.
How many guys?
Roughly 40.
40. Okay. And I said to you, one of the first things you need to do within the first few months is find out what's that background story for every single one of them. Not just how strong are they, or how do they show up, or what's their attitude, or what's their mood. Dig in. Where'd they grow up? How many siblings they got? What about their parents? What's their situation? Why'd they join the military? By you understanding that background, you will be for them someone that they will relate to differently. Then the nature of conversations you can have with them is going to go way deeper in both directions. Then your ability to be a leader for them, well, I mean, you've laid the groundwork. Why? Because you've come to appreciate each other's deeper backgrounds. Now you're in a current moment of drift together in the military, but you can design how you play in that, or work, or fight, or build.
Right. But I think that answers it quite perfectly and leads into the next question is, I'm curious as to how leadership connects with customer service or service in general. Because when I think of leadership, I think of the servant leadership aspect of it. Now, how do the two relate? The service aspect and the leadership aspect, and how can I use them in conjunction to become a better leader?
I could play with you on this one, because when someone goes into the military, what's it called? Being in the
what? The military.
It's called being in the service, dude.
Being in the service. Absolutely.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
I just had a light bulb go off there.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So it's government service, it's public service, it's military service, financial service, legal service, medical service. The world's all made up of service. So what we haven't dealt with is what is service. And I'll just go straight to the chase. Service is taking action to create value for someone you care about. Service is taking action. It could be face-to-face, over the phone. You could write something, you could order something, you could do something that creates value. In other words, it was useful and appreciated by someone you care about. Hey, by the way, if it's self-service, you care about yourself. So you take action to create value for yourself. But in the military, you're now going to be going into a situation where you're going to need to take care of the well-being of the people in your platoon. And you want to improve them. You want to build them up. You have them be a better team working together. You want them to get more physically fit, more capable with their tools and equipment. You want to develop their own leadership capabilities. So you're going to create value for them. By the way, the platoon will then create value for the company. The company will create value for the branch of the military you're in. The military will create value for the nation and defense of the nation. The nation will create value for all the citizens and hopefully all of the other countries around the world, because we're all in a community there as well. With me?
Right, absolutely.
Okay, so service is taking action to create value for someone you care about. What's care?
Is that a question, Ron?
Yeah, well, I know you didn't get it in school. Care is concern for future well-being.
I think that's so key.
Care is concern for future well-being. So if you want to be a great servant leader, what you want to do is let the people who you care about, in this case, let's say your platoon mates, know that you care about their future. And then everything you do is going to help create value to take care of that future, take care of their well-being in that future. You paint that kind of a image for them, you let them know what you're about, then you're going to get followers. A leader doesn't exist without followers. How do you get followers? You've got to be leading them somewhere that they want to go, that they see as actually a better place. And by the way, I think you're ideally placed to do that.
Absolutely right, and that's why it's such an awesome responsibility. I mean, there's nowhere else really that you could be 23 years old and be put in a situation where you have the opportunity to be a leader to 40, 45, 35 people. But as you were saying, so creating, helping someone, really caring about someone says that I really care about your future and where you go. So how does one show that to somebody, that I really do care about you in terms of your future progression, growth, self-actualization, whatever the case may be? What does that actually look like, actually showing people that you do genuinely care? Because I know for a lot of young leaders, this is, sometimes people will come in and be an authoritarian person, but say, I'm really
Yeah.
trying to look out for you. What does that
Yeah.
look like?
Well, I think it goes back to this idea of being enormously curious about the world of the other so that you can become a better listener to understand what it is that they're concerned about. That in listening well to the other person, we can then discern what is it that they're afraid of? What is it that they're anxious about? What is it they may have fear from? And some of that stuff could come from the past. You want to be able to listen sensitively to that. What kind of ambition do they have? What kind of aspiration do they have? What kind of vision do they have about a possible future that maybe even more than they're comfortable telling you about? Some will be, some have the strong ego and are happy to do so, but many are not. And so then being the person who can help to elicit from someone their sense of what it is that they see that they could become. A human being is always becoming. We're always living into the future. We're always creating, 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 creating. It's like the moment of now is past. The moment of now is past. The moment of now is past. And so what is it somebody can see themselves as becoming? When they can be in that conversation with you and you can listen to that aspiration of them, which is not just like, I've set a goal and I want a higher goal, I want a higher goal. Why are you even driven that way? What's in the background there? Are you trying to prove it to your dad, or do you come out of for example, somebody who does come out of a military family and feels a sense of, duty and responsibility and respect, or does somebody else want to, whatever it may be? That's the first call for a leader, is to be a better listener so that you can appreciate what kind of a future they're going to care about, so that you can care about their well-being so that they arrive in that future.
Yeah, I hope a lot of my friends listen to that, Ron, because that's something, for example, one thing I've been hearing a lot is that in the military, we have these things called counselings, basically different types of counselings, but you and I will sit down, and one of those types of counseling is like a professional growth counseling where, I could lay out for you, we could go over your strengths and weaknesses, your future goals, how we want to plan to get you to those future goals. But one thing happens is that, it seems, I haven't experienced it yet, but once I start to experience it, people become very busy. And one of the first things that they forget to do is to sit down with their, in this case, soldiers or employees in the business world, and to not go over that anymore because they don't have the time anymore or something like that. And I was talking to a chaplain recently, and he gave us like a class on ethics, and it was great. And one
Oh,
of the
great.
things, what was that?
I said, great. I'm
Yeah,
happy to hear it.
he was phenomenal. The chaplain was really great. And then one of the things that he was talking about is that as a leader, professional growth and development is really a cornerstone of our job. But one thing that he doesn't see, once we leave our initial trainings and so forth, and we actually take the platoon, is that he doesn't see many young leaders develop a professional training, program or something of the lines for his soldiers. But the ones that he has seen that have done it, it really it really helps the soldiers, because a lot of the times these soldiers are running away from situations back home where
Right.
this is, they never had that guidance, that mentorship. So do you
Right.
think that that's something that can be useful? And maybe, I don't know what it would look like really, because
You're just
as
getting
we've been,
started.
right, I just gotten started. What do you think a developmental kind of program would look like when you're stepping into a situation in which you are 23 and now a lot of people you're leading are 17, 18, 19, but at the same time, it's like you don't want to come in and like fundamentally turn everything around and think that you know everything. You understand what I'm saying, right? Because I think it could be
Oh, yeah. Oh,
a
yeah.
dual-edged sword.
Oh, yeah. When you were talking about people who are in these leadership positions and then too soon stop doing the one-on-one interviews or stop doing the professional development oriented conversations. Yeah. Um, if you're the only one responsible for making sure those happen, that's a lot of burden on you. That's a lot of weight. That's a lot of expectation. So where I would start, because, within the military, you're going to have all kinds of resources and different frameworks and models. And so it'd be foolish of me to try to say, here's what should be in your leadership development program. But I would say at the very beginning with your platoon, you want to generate the kind of conversations of listening to, for, and about each other. Because you think about the kind of, I'll use a word not often associated, but you'll understand what I mean, a kind of intimacy amongst the people in the platoon where people say, dude, you are so not like me, but I get why you are the way you are. If the listening conversation is done in a mood of respect and mutual curiosity and everybody gets enough time, and I'm not saying all 40 people sit around and you go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, not like that at all. You could break them up into small groups of 3 and say, guys, here's the assignment for the next hour. I want you to share with each other some of your background history. And then a week later, you do it again, but you mix it up and you mix it up and you mix it up and you mix it up. And you can change the question each time, but what you're looking to do is get them to disclose what is it about themselves and their background so that their platoon mates can get a sense of them as real people, and then overlay that's you now as the leader, with this whole narrative about we're going to be taking care of each other. We're looking out for each other's true well-being, not just for the performance in the shooting range, not just for the performance on the jogging track. Of course we care about that, but too many leaders come in and say, that's all I care about. If I get high performance, I was a good leader. No. At 23, if you're going to be leading 17 and 18-year-olds, you have a lot more responsibility to set these guys up so that they have an early experience in their lives of caring about, curiously listening well to somebody else who is or is not like them in a mood of respect.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that's something that can really, like you said, help. And I think it's funny. A lot of the reading that I've done on the leadership and stuff like that is that when the culture is better, the performance is higher.
Way better. Way better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I was talking to Chester Elton, which I suppose you know, and
he's a good friend.
He was saying that people view leadership and service, as you're saying, as being the soft stuff. But when you get the soft stuff right, the hard stuff becomes easy because everything else just it opens up a new world, it seems, when you have a collaborative team that can come together and really accomplish anything. So how have you,
Kevin, that can be your superpower for your platoon,
right?
Because so many other platoon leaders are not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And yet you can weave together a fabric of care upon which anything is possible.
Mm-hmm. But it really, as you're saying, it really starts with listening, right? Because I think that's so interesting that you say listening, because in terms of leadership, you don't really hear listening come up in conversation.
Oh, dude, I'm a professional speaker.
Right.
But what made me so successful is I'm such a damn good listener. And what I mean by that is I can get on a stage anywhere in the world and I can just attune myself to the mood of the room, the way people are sitting, what the eye contact is or isn't like, not just with me, but with each other, the way the body language is, what's the tone, what's the level of volume during the coffee break, before, after. I'll go talk to the leaders ahead of time and get a certain, pickup of what's going on there. That's listening. Then by the time it's time for me to speak, I'm already in sync. By the time your platoon goes out in the field, you guys are already a team.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. So then in that case, one thing I find is that in the military, specifically in certain jobs in the military, there tends to be a lot of alphas. And when there's a lot of alpha male type of people, it's usually my way or the highway, or I have the best idea. And, in the leadership position, there are a lot of these alphas. So how do I really start to, not saying that I'm an alpha.
Yeah.
Well, how do I
go back and read history? Have them go back and read about Eisenhower. Have them go back and read about what really makes a Navy SEALs team, super crack.
Right.
It's not that each one's there going, I know best. It's that they're in there going, there's a we here.
Mm.
There's a we here that's way more operatively powerful.
So then, Ron, how do I become a better listener if that's something that I've never been really, is it something that I just start tomorrow and say, okay, time for me to listen? Or do you think that it's more something that is developed over time?
Well, I mean, you obviously, any skillfulness, any sensibility develops over time. You don't take a class and then be an expert. You do it a lot. Um, so when you're listening, what you want to be listening for is tone, not just topic. So when you hear somebody, if you get caught by the words, you missed that there was some underlying dissatisfaction. You kind of want to get curious about that. That's one example of better listening. The topic, you can come back to the topic always, but the tone, people will bury it, they'll hide it, they'll say, I never mind, I don't want to talk about that. But you want to go explore. And it's not just negative tone. It's also if people are like, God, I've always wanted, really, tell me about that. Why do you say always? Where did it come from? Da-da-da. And to the extent that you can find out what was in their actual history, where did they grow up? What did they learn? Who were their mentors? What critical stuff happened during their lives that really set up as a lesson for them? What about mom and dad, brothers, sisters, etc.? I mean, people, we show up, especially at 18 and 17 and 19 years old. These guys are not even formed. These guys have still got literally brains that are still forming. And so your ability to be that kind of, I'm not saying you're going to go in like a social worker and go, tell me all your problems. No, you're going, hey, dude, you're on my platoon, and we're going to be the best performing platoon this place has ever had. And I want to really understand and appreciate who you are. Come on, tell me the whole story, dude. Because if you don't know the whole story, Devin, and you're going to try and lead them, then you've got something under the surface there that could be the thing you step on and it falls through just when you need stability. You know what I'm talking about. You'd rather have that stuff known, understood, appreciated, accepted.
Right. That's so much deeper than what's on the surface to a lot of leadership and what we see. And that is, like I said, that is really, really powerful stuff. So thank you so much for sharing that.
People, to use your earlier word, people often think about leadership like, okay, what's the circumstance and what's the goal?
Mm.
Rather than, who are the people?
Right.
So there's a book called $1 Trillion Coach about a guy named Bill Campbell. You read that, right? And he said, whenever the shit hit the fan, what'd they do? The first thing he does, he goes to the people.
Mm.
Something's going on in the company. He wants to know what's going on with the people. He wants better performance. He wants to make a major decision. He's going to start by finding out how the people are. What's going on there? That's where it all comes from.
So then, Ron, when you go into a company to work with with these executives or whoever it is that you work with in specific, what are some of the key principles that you're teaching them or having them? I'm sure it's circumstantial, of course. But is there a trend that you see in organizations that there's that missing link that you oftentimes have to help repair, that really then helps turn around? Or, okay, what is it that you do see then?
Well, earlier on, I talked about how the educational systems and curriculum in much of the world, I think, is failing young people today. And to call it educational malpractice is a pretty harsh statement, but I think it's valid, given how many people are still aspiring to get that degree, and that's going to be my, and then finding out there's no job that needs that. I mean, there are whole countries in the world where there are segments of the population that are seriously struggling right now. And we're not even talking about the US, where so many come out in debt and also aren't equipped, to actually work. So I'm to ask me your question again. When I think about that level of malpractice, I just get, it gets me all stirred up.
I know. I want to kind of transfer my question then. So okay. If you were to go back and rework the educational system yourself, you were in charge of it all, what would you like to see implemented, or what type of classes would you like to see students taught that you think would lead to the world and all its people being more fulfilled? I think that's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great question. And you know, when you say if you could go, no, 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 I don't think of my life that way. I say now that I still have quite a few decades left, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Okay. So I am right now using COVID to transition from being just the customer service guru in the world. I don't mean just like disparaging it. I mean, I'm hell of a proud of it, right? But saying, look, service is about value and about creating value. And that's been calibrated in terms of, you know, compliments and net promoter scores and revenue and profitability, all that stuff. But service fundamentally should be an act of care for someone. So, okay, what the hell is care? And I'm not satisfied that it's only the philosophers who talk about it, or that care is only sitting over there in the healthcare field. Now, that makes sense historically because the word care originally meant to grieve, like a wounded soldier or somebody ill or dying. Oh, cool. It was about grieving. That's not what we mean today when we say, why should I care? What do you care about? Hey, we need to take better care of each other, of the environment, of our society, of our poor, of our, come on, we need to take better care. So there's no freaking curriculum for care. I'll build it. I'll build it. You know, there's 1,578 words in Wikipedia that end with the word ology. And there isn't a careology. Give
That's
me a
great.
freak, Devin, give me a freaking break. You're telling me that we've got this level of educational, institutional design and delivery year on year on year on year, and we're not teaching people what it is to be in service. We're not teaching people what it is to care. We're not teaching people what it is to be a human being. I think we need some educational innovation here, and I'm up for doing it.
I think that's first off how you reframed my question was really cool, and I think that is you know, a part of why you're able to perform at a high level. You said, what if I still have all of this time? But what you're saying is something I definitely agree with. And you know, in my endeavors with my own, you know, Society of Growth and Success organization that, you know, try to help, we work together as young people to try to answer some of these questions, like you were saying about careology. I think that's something that is I mean, I've never heard that put that way, but that needs to go
I
in the
made it
dictionary.
up, dude.
I know,
I
I
made
know.
it. But that's, you know, that's an example that once you get that life's a drift and you can design and you innovate in conversations in a community with other people, then you can start to figure out, where am I going to put my stick in the ground? What am I going to stand for? What is Devin going to stand for in the military with his platoon? Bam, you're going to make that something exceptional because you said so. And in your case, you're going to bring people along because they belong to you. You're their leader. In my case, I have to do a different kind of a seduction. I have to do a different kind of conversational engagement with the world to say, yoo-hoo, got that breakdown going on? Got all that alienation and all that anxiety that's going on? You know, ever wonder where that's coming from or what you need to learn that you didn't learn already? Come on, let's go to work.
Right. And I'm curious about this next thing, Ron, because I've been studying like the law of attraction and so forth and things of that sort. So, and obviously to be at your level, you know, there's a certain degree of, you know, you do things a little differently. So what do you think that are, you know, what do you have a routine, number one, and what are some of your daily practices that you feel
Good question.
have you some sense of
Yeah.
mindfulness or mental
Yep.
clarity that allow you to think of, like you just said, you know, I'm going to use these next couple decades to transform that system. Not what if, like, what does your routine look like, and how do you get in that mental state where of high performance, I guess you can say.
Well, I'll tell you two things. One is how I wake up in the morning, and the other is the way I start and end every single meeting. So the wake up in the morning is, I'm like everybody else. Human beings we're biological, we're social, we're historical, we're linguistic, and we're moody. Human beings are moody little mothers. I mean, you know, we have our emotional swings and we have our moods and this and that. And if you don't know what I mean, you wake up in the morning and you're in a mood. You didn't pick it, you didn't design it, you just woke up in it, right? But I have taken absolute full responsibility for ensuring that I intervene with my mood every morning. So there's a couple of, just little recordings. The one's a song and one is a nice, set of affirmations and a nice voice, little music in the background about love and about life and about a good day and that kind of stuff. And, you can say, come on, that's really hokey. You've heard that before. Yeah, but I didn't hear it this morning and I didn't hear it this morning and I didn't hear it this morning. And you know what? It takes 20 minutes. And then I'm out of bed like, oh yeah, all right, here we go. It's going to be a better day. Because if I don't do that and I go off into the day, I mean, sometimes, it just happens and I have to rush off into the day. I can feel the difference. I can feel the vulnerability. I can feel the more, triggered unsettledness. So I would say that that's my version of mindfulness practice. And now that I'm here in Singapore, not flying all over the world like a blue ass fly, I do it in the morning with my wife in bed. And it's gorgeous because it just really sets the two of us in this really lovely, gentle tone with each other and with ourselves. And then we can go off into a productive day. The second thing is every meeting, and by meeting, I mean, with people I know. I wouldn't do it with somebody I met for the first time necessarily. But I start by saying, okay, wait, let's check in. And we just go around the group. Each person takes a minute, 2, sometimes 3 or 4, and just check in. How's your mood? First question. And then, what's going on? How do you, okay, great. So we get oriented, we get connected with each other. We're listening to the set of the other people before we start the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, we do the same thing in checking out. Yeah, it makes people want to be in my meetings.
Right. I think that would be helpful for a lot of others, because I know a lot of people dread meetings. Okay.
Oh,
but I think that is now in terms of an organizational level as a service expert. Now, do you go into any companies or so forth and be like, these are activities that you can do to help get more engagement? Or like, do you have, I would assume you do, what kind of activities are, I don't know if I'm framing it in the right sense, but
yeah, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. So when I started teaching about service, like really vigorously, after I was it was me with a flip chart and magic marker and running around the world and giving speeches. And then I started writing books, but then I wanted to build a curriculum. My grandmother taught kindergarten. My mom taught high school. I'm from a family of educators. I wanted to build a curriculum. So I created what I call Up Your Service College. And it actually had, courses and fundamental principles. And there's 10 fundamental principles about what is service. How do you give better service? How do you create more value? How do you recover when things go wrong? How do you develop greater trust in a service relationship? I'm not going to try and teach them all right now, but why aren't they being taught in school? Because you don't have to have a job to learn those. And you know what? You'll get a better job if you know them when you go for the interview. And that'll be one of the vehicles that I'll use to get this curriculum out into the world, is every young person who's ready to get a job who never learned about service, never learned about customer, never learned about taking action to create value for someone else because they were busy passing tests. Okay? And that one, by the way, we're probably going to give away so that the young people of the world can go get it and nail the interview and get the job. That's one level. Fundamental principles about service and improving service that aren't taught in school. People got to learn them and use them. And you can bring that into a company, and then a team learns them and they learn how to use them, and they're very effective. But the next level above that is building the culture of service. And that's not every frontline person's job. That's leadership's job. That's leadership and supervisory and managerial levels. And then there's something we call 12 building blocks. And people can find out a lot more about this at our website. If you go to ronkauffman.com or upliftingservice.com, you will find a ton of stuff for free. Or just go on YouTube and type my name. You type my name on YouTube, there's a million hits, and there's plenty of free speeches, et cetera, et cetera. So there's principles about service, activities for building a culture of service, and then there's leadership behaviors that people, like you referred to them as servant leaders. Well, there's 7 behaviors we've teased out that people need to know and follow and not violate if you really want to build a strong culture of service. And if you want to deliver service consistently over time that gets better and better, you have to have the culture for it. So it all ties together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would think so. And that's one thing I've always heard, is that the culture really starts at the top. And what you've seen at the lowest level is a duplication or a replication of what's really going on at the top.
Or a frustration.
Right. So then, Ron, what, in your opinion, if you can just give us one thing as far as culture is concerned, what is one thing I think we've kind of talked about it already in terms of care and, showing people that we actually care, but are there any other actionable things that one can do? If you just maybe give us one thing to really start to build that culture of service.
Well, I mean, there are many. Um, One I'm just going to tap, and then the other one I'll touch. Okay. The tap is you need to have what we call an engaging service vision. You've got to have that articulation that people can look at and go, like, be all you can be. Or with Federal Express, when they say my blood runs purple, right? There's Singapore Airlines. It's service even other airlines talk about. Yeah, I mean, it's that it's a credo, it's a principle, it's a clarion call, it's a tagline, it's a slogan. It doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that your people go, yeah, I want to be a part of that. You need to invent that, and you can do it with your team. And it doesn't just happen by putting a pen on paper. It's a whole exercise to tease the language so that people go, that's it, that resonates. I want to be part of that game. Okay, you could actually do that with your platoon. Now, 40 guys and they're young, it's going to be a hell of an exercise, but it's worth jumping into and chewing on together as a team, because if you can come out with that, people will remember it the rest of their lives. It'll give them a sense of meaning. That's the touch. The touch is about what do you do when new people come onto your culture? When new people join your team, the orientation of a new person could not be more vital, because you don't get a second chance to make the first impression. And that's true with a customer, but it's also true with a colleague. So I don't know if your platoon has it been formed yet?
Yeah. When I'm there, I'll be probably the only person that hasn't been there for a while. I'll be the new guy to a group of well-formed individuals.
Wow. So you've got a very unique situation.
Yeah, to say the least.
Okay. But then all the more, you really want to go in as a phenomenal listener, not listening like accepting, not listening like, I promise you it's going to be that. But before you come in and try to assert it's going to be this way, you probably want to listen real well to the lay of the land, in which case then the new service member orientation, it's your orientation that you want to be thoughtful about. And you could actually set it up where you're saying to these guys, listen, we got a team responsibility here. I'm going to be your platoon leader. And you've already guys have been together for a while. So I'm the one that gets to get oriented to the situation. Not like you're here to tell me how it's been and that's the way we're going to do it. But I want you to be absolutely clear with me about the way it is and how it got that way, blah, 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 blah. So you get the lay of the land quickly, and they feel responsible for helping you get it.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people in my shoes, it's like, how am I going to affect change when people have been there for, 9 months together already, and then I'm the guy that just walks in, and it's like, do I take that initial 90 days or 30 days or whatever to, like you said, get a feel or a grasp of what is going on there. And then also on the other hand, you have your counterpart who's like that non-commissioned officer, who is your platoon sergeant, who's your colleague really working with you to craft the platoon. And then the other question is, what should that interaction initially be like? Because, this person's been in the military for like 9, 10, 11 years. And then here I come, like 1 year of service in, and now I'm responsible. And then,
right.
In your opinion, what should that look like? That encounter with that.
The two of you want to sit down and have probably one of the best conversations you've ever had in your life, in terms of really listening to, like with devotion, a sense of curiosity about tell me about your life. Don't just tell me about the platoon. We'll get to the guys. Tell me about you. And because you and that other person are going to be like this. You're never going to have another staff sergeant that was your first staff sergeant, ever. That's going to be somebody important to you. And, if you do this well, you guys are going to be friends the rest of your lives.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, going back to listening, so much of it has gone back to listening. I think that's so fascinating because it's so simple in thought, but a lot of people just don't practice it, which is fascinating, Ron. Last question I have for you, because I've gotten a ton out of this, and I know other people have as well, is what do you really hope that your legacy will be? and hopefully not for a long time, but when you're no longer here and people look back on Ron Kauffman, what do they think of?
Thank you. Thank you. I had a friend named Tony Bazan who invented the mind map, and he passed away last year. But if you knew who he was, you knew it meant mind maps, right? I mean, there's a particular tool, a particular methodology, or, in my case, I've reached the point now where what I'm really interested in is education for the well-being of humanity. What is that curriculum that could be crafted that's well designed, not like you have to start here and end there, but and from the service work I've done, I'm pretty good at being able to chunk it down so that people can just learn various discrete components at different times, and then put them in, make them easily and widely available. That means make them translatable into other languages. That means make them available online. That means make them available in different kinds of programs with leaders' guides so that other people can use them in different contexts and be an educational innovator. Be somebody who actually helps to craft education for the well-being of humanity. And not like an idea that sits in a library stack somewhere, but like something that actually gets used. So then that means I can think like a philosopher, but I can't write like one. And I can't teach like one. Right? There's a place for that. And I've been privileged to be the student of many, primarily a gentleman named Fernando Flores, who just, has mentored me for a long, long time, and many, many, many other folks. And so there's an expression amongst writers that says, think like a philosopher, write like a truck driver. To which I add one more, which is think like a philosopher, teach like a grandmother.
That's great. Wow.
And I'll take that one.
Right. That is awesome. Well, Ron, thank you so much. I mean, this has been really, really impactful. It's so funny that you're like when people think of customer service, they think of it as being maybe something fluffy or on the surface, but this goes to show that customer service is much deeper than just like going to Macy's and having that interaction. But it could really be something that we utilize to craft a better life for ourselves and then bring it into any job or workforce in the world, which is really the impact of it, which is what I've taken away.
And a neighborhood and a community and a city and a state and a country and the world.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Right. So it's something that's everywhere. And thank you so much for sharing that message. And I really can't thank you enough for coming on, Ron. This has been one of the most interesting and really helpful conversations on so many different aspects and levels. So thank you so much.
Go get them, Devin. Your platoon's going to be lucky to be with you, and you'll be lucky to be with them.
Thanks, Ron.